to yet another. I almost said Friday Night Fights like a goofball. Well, we're getting off to a great start here. Welcome to another Brony Debates Live. I hope you are all having a wonderful Friday night and have some amazing plans for the weekend. So, tonight we've got a fairly interesting topic. At least I think it is. Suggested by a friend of the show, Moonbeam. She's been on the debate and on the gaming streams once or twice before. But she suggested this topic a couple of months ago, and we're just now getting around to it. The way she worded the suggestion was, should reviewers finish something before they review it? So something can mean anything in this case. It can mean a book. It could mean a play, a movie, a TV show, a video game, things like that. But should you finish it before you review it? Now, I've got some thoughts on this myself. Some of my opinions might be a little contentious on this one. So to keep me in check, I made sure to bring along our usual friend of the show, Mr. DJ Skywalker. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Hello, everyone. Great to be here again. Thank you for letting me come on.
Yeah, great to have you. And we've got two of our friends joining us for the first time on Brony Debates Live, starting with Mr. Deckard Spade. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much.
Very good. And I hope we have a good conversation. We've also got Dr. Wolf joining us tonight. Dr. Wolf, welcome to my therapy session.
Well, greetings to you, Brony. It's been quite a while since we've had a discussion.
Yep, I'm a bad friend, and I'm not very good at keeping up with my people. Hopefully I can get better at that as time goes on. So if this is your first time tuning into the stream tonight, first of all, welcome. I hope you enjoy yourself. But here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk about this topic for about 45 minutes, something along those lines. And then while we're talking, we're gonna be watching the stream chat. And, seeing what you guys have to say. If we see you have any interesting comments, or if you have any questions for any of us while we're talking here, we're going to write those down. And in the last 15 minutes or so, we will address those questions then. So with that being said, I got to give a big shout out to my very generous supporters on Patreon, who make my life so much easier, especially those guys on the $10 and up tier. This is a big long list, but every time I add a person to this list, my bills get easier to pay. So I'm going to take a big deep breath and give a big thank you to Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministries, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker right here, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Princess Sunshine, Sparkle, Bootleg Bard, the Silly Fox Zoroark 720, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. Guys, most of these people, as you know, have their own content. Those links will be in the description. And all of my guests have their own content as well. If you didn't know that already, I would highly recommend checking everybody out. Dr. Wolf just uploaded a video today that was pretty fun to watch. And Deckard, did you? I did some recording for you recently. Did you have anything coming up that you want to talk about real quick?
I'm going to be working on some personal projects, but I think the most recent thing I did was an Among Us review.
Oh, nice. So that's a perfect starting off point. Did you finish Among Us?
I've done more than a few rounds playing it with other people in the community. It has been an interesting experience, especially when you take on a different character when you're talking.
Right, but did you finish the campaign? Did you complete the story mode? Have you gotten all the unlockables?
It doesn't have any.
All right, so what business do you have reviewing that then?
Well, generally, you can give a short review to discuss the experience, the mechanics, and an idea of recommendations for what you can do to make the experience enjoyable.
So, Deckard, why don't you start us off with your general thoughts on this topic here? Should a reviewer review something before they've finished it in whatever nebulous sense that might be. So give us your general thoughts on what's the first thing that comes to head when I uttered that sentence to you.
Well, as odd as it sounds, you have to ask yourself, does it have a definitive end?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something like watching a television show, or you're going through some kind of game that you've played before that has a full story and narrative, you may be able to play it from start to finish and explain what your favorite experience is. If you're playing something that's more open-ended, however, that may not have a story, or you have to generate it yourself, you may have to look at different characteristics and maybe define your own idea of where to start and finish yourself when you're reviewing it.
All right. So we'll keep that in mind for now, and let's go to our other first-time guest for the night. Dr. Wolf, when I approached you earlier today, thank you for coming on so last minute, by the way. When I approached you earlier today and told you about the topic, what was the first thing to come to your head, and how do you feel about it?
Well, I believe the first suggestion that I had come up with when you first brought up the topic, I said, say there are people on YouTube who are reviewing something like The Mandalorian, which is in the middle of its season 2 right now. With only one episode coming out every week, people can get excited and want to talk about their thoughts on every story and give their predictions on what might happen next.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's okay when somebody's excited about something that is coming out in short bursts. Hey, I really like this week's story. I love how they did this, and I love how I'm predicting that this might happen in the future. It's a fun idea. Is that really reviewing what they're doing? I don't know. Can you really call it a review of the Mandalorian show when they're only part the way through the season and they're trying to review season 2 in those short bursts?
Well, pardon my interruption, but spoiler alert, that's my next question, but go ahead.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I can see this sort of question really being open to, well, what is it that someone is reviewing? Because in the case of video games, let's say, I have played a great many very short video games. Something like the first Portal, that can be finished in just a few hours. And people praise it to no end. And yeah, even today, it's brilliant. But if you're looking at a game like something else I've played and put thousands of hours into and never saw everything, never saw every part of the game, there's World of Warcraft. Can you really say that you can review World of Warcraft if you haven't gone everywhere, haven't done everything? I mean, that's an incredibly tall order to expect somebody who is meant to review World of Warcraft, asking them, well, you have to go everywhere. You have to do everything. You have to delve into every dungeon and get every piece of equipment. That's, in order to get the complete experience, one could make that argument, but can you really expect anyone to say, well, you have to see everything in order to have a proper review? I don't know if you could really say that about anything.
I think that there was actually a title for an achievement called The Insane, where you had to do every single quest and see everything for a certain period of time. And I don't think it applies the same way it used to, but it took way too much effort to even try to get that title.
Interesting. So that makes me just slightly curious as to how many people have that title, but with World of Warcraft players, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it's a very high number. But we haven't heard from DJ yet. So DJ, give us your initial impressions of this topic.
I think I'm in a similar boat as the good doctor here. To me, it always comes down to a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the realm of movies and TV shows, I think it's fair to say to have reviewed it in whole. Well, depending on if it's actually out in full or not. With games, it is a much higher case-by-case basis with how different they are. And like they've brought up my fellow people here have brought up, some games just can't be completed.
All right. So we've been talking a lot about video games so far, but how, does this apply to movies, books, ongoing series, TV shows, things like that? So, Doc, what if we took the focus off the video games for a minute and focus more on the other artistic forms as well? Shoot, maybe we could even apply it to music. What do you think about that? Doc, are you there?
I'm still here. And sure, if you want to talk about other forms of media, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, with video games, I can understand, because you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and give my thoughts right here, because I don't really, my audience who watches me on the regular has seen almost every time that I've played a video game. So I almost never play video games, and I sure as heck don't complete them. I'm also not trying to review them. But any show that I've seen, I watch it to completion. Anytime I read a book or a film fiction, the first thing I check is this series complete? Because I like to binge everything and absorb all of what there is before I gauge it and give my thoughts on it. And it's very, very rare that something is so off-putting that once I pick it up, if you hook me in with the premise, I'm probably not going to put it down until I've seen everything, and then I know, okay, these are my thoughts. I have seen reviewers of the past, like, you know, I remember early on in the Brony fandom, we're halfway through season 3, and there were people doing top 10 top 10 episodes of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, or top 10 worst episodes, and I'm like, oh, you mean the show with 30 episodes that's going to be going on for another, you know, we didn't know it at the time, but it's going to be going on for another 7 years, and we have yet to see what the show can really do. Is it going to improve? Is it going to decline? You're going to call the top 10 episodes now. And then there's people that just they'll be reading something, and you know, they'll set out on the adventure to go read it for the purpose of doing their review. Like in my case, maybe a patron suggested it to me, and for whatever reason they just decide they don't want to finish it. It was so bad, or it was too long. This is where the pretentiousness is going to come out of me. I sort of look down on people that can't finish what they start. So those are my thoughts there. So when we apply that to other mediums that are not just games, is there really an excuse? So, Doc, with all that in mind, what do you think there?
Well, there was one thing that you said which really stuck with me. You like to binge through something. Like,
yes.
When you pick it up, you want to get through everything it has to offer. That if you get hooked by a premise, that you are not going to put it down until you reach the very end. And it sounds to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds to me like you have okay, I started this thing, I'm not going to do any other things until I finish this thing. This is the form of entertainment I'm going to get through in the next few days, nothing else. Does that describe you?
Yes, actually, and I apply that to just about everything in life. Maybe it's that, you know, last little bit of autism that I never quite got rid of, but if I'm doing a task, say like at work, or if I'm making something, if I distract myself and go and start doing something else, I will totally lose momentum on whatever I'm doing. It'll be harder for me to pick it back up again. Also, I will drive myself insane.
Alrighty.
Yes.
Well, with that in mind, why it stood out to me is that I'm trying to think in cases where something is brand new and someone is unsure about whether to try this TV show or this book or this video game or whatever else have you, that they're looking for other people's opinions or reviews before trying it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in someone like in your case, who focuses on binging content, like getting through many different episodes of a TV show in only a few days, that would probably fit when you're looking for a review. Oh, this person also went through something like this in only a few days and has a very good review on this. So maybe I should give it a try myself. But what about those who don't feel the need to binge a show in anywhere as short of a time frame? Would that same person get a good opinion on this piece of media when they're looking for reviews and the only ones out for something brand new like that are only from those who binge? Would it really be something that you could say, okay, all these people are giving a good review? Would someone who takes it in very lengthy spades, what have you, and takes months to get through that same show, would they enjoy it as much? Would they have it the same opinion? Or would it be more necessary for that same person to look at a review from someone who only watched the first 2 or 3 episodes of a particular show and gave their opinion on it? And this is also somebody who just takes a lot longer to get through any particular kind of media. Is there a reason why these two different forms of reviews should exist with that in mind?
Okay, so let me be sure I'm 100% clear on your question before I give my take on it, and then we'll pass it off to the other gentleman on the stream there. Are you asking me this question from the perspective of a reviewer or from the perspective of an audience member for a reviewer?
Let's start with from the audience's perspective, then we can go to the reviewer's perspective.
Okay. So from an audience perspective, I would rather know the full opinion of somebody who's seen the whole thing. So there's been quite a few times where I have chosen to not indulge in something because a reviewer said it was bad. But that was that because I don't have a whole lot of time, and if I'm going to spend that time on entertainment, I want to thoroughly enjoy it, and I don't want to waste my time on something that's going to be bad. So, but if I see, if there's a reviewer out there who is only doing it like little bits at a time, or stopped halfway through, or just for whatever reason hasn't seen the whole thing, they're not going to be able to give me a complete answer as to whether or not it maintains its quality, or if I have to get through several episodes before it gets good, which is, again, also something I don't typically do, or if it drops off in quality, things like that. And that's when you're reviewing something as a whole. It's a little bit different when you have a slice of life show that like Friendship is Magic, for example, where the stories are 90% self-contained. So, and they're meant to, the messages and the themes within them are meant to be discussed on another level. So if somebody were to watch an episode and they're not liking it and they stop halfway through, right when you're typically reaching the apex of the conflict, right before you hit the falling action, and the moral of the story starts getting its resolution, we're missing an awful lot there. From the perspective of a reviewer, I don't know. I don't understand it as somebody that has to complete something before I move on to the next thing. So, Deckard, what do you think about Dr. Wolf's question?
I think at this point, you are capable of making a educated opinion and being able to review something without having to fully complete every little detail. And I'm going to bring one thing up, love it or hate it, Star Wars.
Of course, that's if anything, that's the king of. Between that and the comic books industry in general, that's the king of your good luck binging the whole thing.
Well, it's not even just binging the movies. It's, are you familiar with the movies? Are you familiar with the novels? Are you familiar with the comic books? Are you familiar with everything post or pre-Disney, from when they decided to say, okay, none of this exists now, and now we're just going to look at all the new movies we're making. That split a lot of fans. And a lot of them also are going to be like, well, you can't really say that some of this did or didn't exist, or you can't get an idea for the person's character without having read some of this here. It was an evolving media that, as it went from the hands of one owner to another, changed completely.
Okay, so what are your thoughts there?
I think that I'm able to give you an opinion about how R2-D2 and C-3PO are droids without having to have seen the Droids cartoon show from back in the 80s. I think that you should be able to form your own opinion based on the contained experiences that you have from the movies, but you could flesh it out more or give a better perspective based on what you've looked at. It doesn't mean you have to have experienced the entire thing, but you can at least give an educated opinion without having gone through everything from start to finish.
So if you're, I can give you the point that you don't have to read every book by every author, especially with something as expansive as Star Wars that could fill a library by itself. But if you're doing a book or let's say 3 to 5 books by one author that all tell a long consecutive story, within Star Wars, within anything, shoot, it could be the Harry Potter books. You stop halfway through, or shoot, up to 75% of the way through, because you're just not enjoying it. How do you know that you can give the full opinion on whether or not it's any good, without knowing, okay, did this really just continue on this downward slope? Did it never get any better? Or was there some sort of amazing plot twist at the 90% mark right after I stopped reading that made everything make sense and bring a whole nother level to it that you hadn't previously saw before? DJ, I haven't heard from you. What do you think about all this?
Again, I think it's just case by case. Really, there's just so many different ways to express your opinion, because when it comes down to it, that's all a review is someone's opinion. And I think to some extent, some completion is required. Like, I'm not going to really listen to the guy that only sit through half of a movie, because if you can't sit through an entire movie, I don't think that's really something worth listening to. But for something like a TV show, if you watch like the first 3 episodes, you can usually get a decent opinion.
Okay, so when is it, let me ask everybody this then, when is it important to sit through something in its entirety or let it go? Because DJ is saying it's case by case, and I'm trying to get a sense of the criteria of how it's case by case when you're trying to review or analyze a whole story or a whole character arc or something like that. So DJ, can you define some terms for us?
Well, it's going to start off kind of vague, but yeah, I guess it would depend on how you're reviewing it. Are you reviewing it doing the character arcs? Are you reviewing it based on the story? Are you doing a first impressions review? Are you doing just what are your thoughts on it kind of review? There's there's different types. So I guess you got to start. Depends on where you start.
Okay, well
Or you
then,
come at it with the review.
then how about this follow-up question? What is the most valid style of review in your opinion?
Valid.
Yeah. What type of review style carries the most weight in determining something's subjective or objective quality? And in that case, how much should the reviewer dedicate to that craft? See, think about that for a second, and we'll pass that off to Deckard as well. Deckard, what do you think about all that?
I don't want to take away from the fact that there are different kinds of reviews that are out there, but I do think that you need to at least have enough to form a solid opinion before you should start talking about it.
So when do you know you've formed a solid opinion if you haven't seen the whole thing, though? Or if you, at the very least, if you haven't completed the whole story. So let's say we take every episode, every Fluttershy episode, and stuck it on a DVD and said these Fluttershy episodes show her arc over the course of 9 seasons as her character develops, and now we can say that this is a self-contained story. At what point do you have a solid opinion of who Fluttershy is and how she develops?
Well, you can talk about her personality traits as they're displayed in that collection, but I wouldn't say I would review her as the entire series of MLP either, because her interactions could also be subtle from different parts of other episodes that she's in. I mean, you may miss things. Even if she's had some major roles for certain things that were going on, you pick up little things as well. So I wouldn't say it would be a complete opinion of her with just that set, but I would say that you could get at least a decent idea of what her character is like using it.
DJ, we passed you a little bit here. Do you have anything you want to add or take away from this?
I'm still kind of thinking on what you said before, so maybe we should hear from Doc for a little bit.
All right, Doc, what do you think about all that?
That if we had a DVD of all of the Fluttershy-centric episodes in the entirety of the show, you're asking how far into that episode list should you feel like you can form a solid opinion of the character and actually start talking about it, start reviewing it.
So yeah, something like that applied to as just a placeholder example of, you could apply that same concept to literally anything else. I just pulled an example out of my backside here to give us something to work with.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, let me think for a moment.
Ultimately, how much do you know about a topic without having seen as much as possible of what there is to see about that topic? I hope that didn't throw you off your train of thought too much.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to figure out how I should start this.
Mm-hmm.
Because there have been movies I haven't finished, like I've only seen clips of them here and there. There have been TV shows that I haven't finished, that I've maybe gotten halfway through, or even just a tenth of the way through, depending on how long it is.
Mm-hmm.
There are books that I only read the first 1 or 2 in a series of 7. And in all of those cases, I felt like what I've seen here, even though I know it's not everything that this particular form of media has to offer, I think, yes, I can determine whether or not I've been enjoying this. I can talk to other people about what I think worked and what I think didn't. And I think there have even been a few cases of I've made a YouTube video on something that isn't finished yet. I can remember making a YouTube video about the very first episode of The Mandalorian. There was so much of the show that hadn't come out yet, that still hasn't come out yet, and yet I felt I had seen enough and had grown up with a lot of other Star Wars media to be able to form an opinion and to be able to say, I think I really enjoyed this. I think that they are on the right track with this, as compared to this other Star Wars movie or this other Star Wars media. It wasn't finished. And yet I felt okay talking about it.
Mm-hmm. So that begs, like, because when we were talking about this earlier tonight before the stream, I said, because you asked that question, and I said I would have to answer that question with more questions, because I haven't seen The Mandalorian myself. Coincidentally, my roommates are watching it in the other room as we speak. But how does that show compare in terms of story? Is each episode its own contained story, or is each episode a continuation of one of the same plot that they introduce at the beginning of the season or at the beginning of the series, or is it somewhere in the middle?
I think it's actually somewhere in the middle. You definitely have episodes that are direct continuation to another episode, but you also have many other episodes that are very much self-contained stories with a little bit that is building towards the grander narrative. So it is kind of in the middle in that respect.
All right. So does anybody have anything they want to add or take away from this?
Well, I do want to bring one thing up. If we're talking about things like in different mediums, we have different kinds of books that exist. Not only are we talking about genre, but what if you have something like a choose-your-own-adventure novel? Doesn't that kind of throw a wrench in the gears there?
Yeah. Well, certainly, at least in my opinion, a well-written choose-your-own-adventure is going to have some good endings and some bad endings, and they're going to be a reviewer's opinion of any of the branching paths or all of them is going to be heavily influenced by their own subjective opinions on it. So that certainly muddies the waters.
And I mean, I remember reading a bunch of old Goosebump novels when I was younger, and I enjoyed a lot of the stuff that R.L. Stine wrote, but I also remember the choose-your-own-adventure stuff, and it got goofy, and it was fun, but it wasn't the same as reading a normal book from start to end, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that it still brings up another example of like how things are somewhat subjective, and you have to kind of pick where you're going to deal with the review, because not everything is going to start and end in the same place.
So DJ, as somebody steps into the tornado, but DJ, what do you think? What's the most valid style of review in your opinion, and when is it okay to put something down?
Okay, I've been thinking since you asked that earlier. I think for me, the most valid, in heavy quotations, form of review is when it truly is someone's direct opinion on it. You can argue objectivity stuff like how it's filmed, who the cast and crew are, stuff like that. But I think going back to what Dr. Wolf said about how much you enjoy it or even hate it in some people's cases, I think that's when a review is at its truest form, is when it truly is that person's opinion.
Okay, and you prefer things to be opinionated rather than based on objective standards on what something should, or at the very least, what signs things would have to demonstrate that they are actually good, and examples of quality content creation of any kind.
I think as a reader or an audience member, I feel like I get more out of someone's true opinion rather than like detailed specifics out of the creation.
So then let me ask everybody this, because DJ made me think of this question: how much should your subjective opinion as a reviewer play into it? You know, where do things like guilty pleasures come in, or subjective tastes of, because I get this a lot. I'm a little picky, as I said earlier, but there are things that I'll look at them and I'll say, if you know, based on everything I know, this is pretty good, but for some stupid reason I didn't enjoy it. Or and there's a couple of examples where I'm watching something. These are much more rare, but I'll be like, I know this is trash, but I find it enjoyable for whatever, usually because for some stupid reason it made me laugh. Like, I will admit in my shame that I enjoyed Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. I have absolutely no reason to like that show, but it made me laugh a few times. So how does that level of subjectivity fall into what you do as a reviewer, and how much of a chance you should give whatever it is that you're reviewing? Doc, what do you think about all that?
Well, I'm thinking about what each of you stated, and I'm trying to think, in what cases do I prefer looking up someone who reviews as a profession and would have the expertise to break down specifics as far as technique.
Would you have that expectation of somebody who makes a living off of doing what they do? Would you have that expectation of someone like the Siskel and Ebert of whatever it is it may be?
I don't really have that expectation, because there are some cases where I actually would prefer to listen to someone who isn't reviewing professionally or even as a hobby, and just gives their own opinion on what they've just seen or what they just read, and actually place more of my trust in that statement than something from a professional who's been doing this for decades. It just depends. I can see both cases as being valid, but there's all kinds of reasons why I might prefer one or the other. It just really depends.
So you're saying that there's not really a whole lot of consistency. It really is in how you tackle these things or how you view them. It really all is just case by case for you at the very least. And it sounds like DJ has a similar mentality. Is that correct?
Seems about right. Yeah.
All right. How about you, Deckard? Do you have anything you want to add or take away from any of this?
I think I'm going to answer your question with another question.
Okay. I love that.
Who is best princess?
Ooh, that's an interesting one, because objectively it's Twilight. She's done the most on screen. But I am a sucker for Princess Celestia, because I can fully admit that I have a fondness for teacher type characters. I tend to look up to them, and I mean, we all know how well she performed in the show itself, but I cannot get out of my head that she held down the fort of the entirety of Equestria for a millennium with, by and large, very few problems. And because of that, like, I can't have that backstory in my head and compare it to, let's be generous and say at the end of the series, Twilight had 60 years on her, right? I can't compare 60 years of experience to 1,000. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
I definitely understand where you're getting at. Objectively, I agree. Twilight is probably one of the better ones for the example of development in the show. But I have to disagree when I look at it and say that it's definitely Princess Luna.
Okay, and tell me why.
I believe that Celestia also still ignored her sister, didn't quite pay attention to what happened before she got sent to the moon, and even though she's capable of teaching, she misses out on social cues and obviously has problems with trying to pick up on what could be obviously solved. I mean, she has Twilight solve everything for her.
Yeah, but how? And then I would say, but how did Luna not do the same thing? And then we start having that conversation, because then I could say Luna or Celestia rather never turned evil and tried to destroy the world. So and even then when they came back, they didn't have a whole lot of interaction for 7 seasons, and then they fought with each other, and then didn't have a whole lot of interaction for another 2 seasons, and then fought with each other again, showing that you came back after your 1,000-year moon hiatus and still didn't bother to address any of the actual issues that caused them in the first place. So, we're still dealing with objective versus subjective here, and objectively I can't see the point that I can't see or understand the point that you're making. And when the
point I'm trying to make is that it's that the objective and subjectiveness of it is up to the person's individual perception. How complete the review is always going to be up to the reviewer and the people that are watching it.
Right. And so that's why I asked the question of what is the most valid type of review, because then because I would say that it's impossible to I think it's extremely important to know the whole story and to have the full context, but I think it's impossible for one person to analyze every aspect of something, because so many things go into making any type of art that most people are only going to be able to be experts in anywhere between 1 and 4 aspects of it. So like take movies, for example. There's the writing, there's the acting, there's the directing, there's the editing, there's the cinematography. And you can know how all of those play into each other. But it's also going to be very difficult to analyze more than one thing at a time. So, what do you gentlemen have to say about that before we move on to the next thing? And the crickets answer me.
Princess Luna 2020.
You know what? Princess Brony Book 2028.
I'll agree to that.
Let's never.
Just for that, DJ's my vice president. I don't care if he consents or not. He's my vice president. Welcome to the team, DJ. Sweet.
I'm going to oust you from office and take over.
Yeah, Doc, you can be my treasurer. Anyway. So what do you guys think of that? Do you have any thoughts on what I just said? No.
It just goes into the never-ending fight between subjective and objective.
Right, and where's the balance? I think most people, in terms of an audience perspective, are going to gravitate towards a certain personality type. Like for the longest time, the angry reviewer was the thing to do, and to a degree, it still is. It's people tend to enjoy someone who's very, very forward, very passionate in one way or another, and delivers a lot of energy. And for a lot of men, that manifests itself as, or at least appears as, anger. So, that, and then that type of person is going to be less likely to to really understand the nuances of storytelling or character or cinematography, and they might not take their time to try to understand things that they don't understand. And this was a huge problem in the early fandom, of people just saying stuff without thinking about it. And oftentimes, because they were trying to get their opinions out as fast as possible, same day reviews. Doc, I know you did that, but I'm not calling you out specifically here. It was mostly other people that would just watch and then get on their webcam and completely miss the point of the episode because they were writing while they were watching for their first time and not taking in the full context, and they would miss things that would have explained away things that they would describe as plot twists or inconsistencies that they called out in their reviews. And that's why I keep saying it's important to watch or read the whole thing.
Well, you specifically mentioned that, yes, I certainly did quite a few reviews same day.
Yeah, and that wasn't meant to call you out. I just remembered as it was leaving my mouth, oh shoot, I've got one of those in the room.
That's okay. When you said that, I began to think back to why I started reviewing MLP in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That the early reviewers and analysis of the show, I enjoyed listening to each of the few that there were, but not a one of them seemed to have a positive opinion of Fluttershy. Not a one. And I just kept scratching my head. I would watch the show and I admired her character. I even thought she was inspiring, but none of the other reviewers at that time seemed to think that way. And I was trying to understand their opinion. I just kept feeling confused about it. It was because they did not have that positive opinion of Fluttershy, despite the fact that they were talking about episodes that have been out for months. I felt inspired to give my own voice.
Mm-hmm. I have roughly the same story, but replace Fluttershy with King Sombra.
Uh-huh. So there was some good that came out of some reviewers having an opinion, as you put it, even an angry opinion, and it just led to more people wanting to come up and say, hey, what about this?
Mm-hmm. So here's a question I wanted to ask you guys is when would you say you can get away with not seeing the whole thing? Doc, what do you think about that? When is it okay to not have the full context when you're reviewing?
I don't know if there's really an answer for that. I don't know if I could really give a clear stance on any part of that question. Because I can think of so many examples across so many different types of media where I might think it's okay to say this when you've only seen this much. And in other cases, I'd say, actually, no, you really should take a deeper look into this show because I think you're missing something.
Mm-hmm.
I can see both sides of the issue here. I really can.
Well, I've given, my thoughts on that, and my thoughts are rarely to never. But DJ, what do you think?
When is it acceptable?
Yeah, I see Angel of Speed in the chat saying when it's a very long ongoing series like One Piece, you just don't even bother touching One Piece. The dinosaurs will have evolved back into the food chain by the time One Piece ends. But what do you think, DJ?
I don't know about that. One of the YouTubers I've been following has been doing a review, and it's only taken him 5 months to catch up.
That man, I need to know what he does so I can do it too, and afford to have that kind of time to watch all 1,000 episodes.
So he's been doing the manga. He hasn't been doing the anime.
Okay, so he's been reading the cliff notes and skipping pages. That's he's been cheating.
if that's what you want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
But what is accept? I think the most common time is time restraints. I think that comes down to a lot of more in the professional air. I know some hobbyists would probably give their own time restraints, but companies like IGN or other reviewing companies, they're going to have a lot of time restraints. As soon as something comes out, you maybe get a few days at most to get it. And it's not a good thing, but it makes it understandable.
I have yet to see that produce a quality product, so I disagree there, but we'll leave that open. Deckard, what do you think?
I think if you physically can't, because if something is broken or left incomplete, you may not be able to give the opinion you want. If a series is canceled, if you're playing a video game and something in the code breaks it completely so that you can't finish it. I remember playing Action 52 and Cheetleman, and that gives me nightmares. If you have something that's basically, if you look at it and you say, this doesn't give me a complete picture, and you can for certain say that, then you really shouldn't try to review it.
Okay. So if anything, I feel like that plays into what I said. If I were to really truly answer my own question without being a pretentious jerk for once in my life, I would say there are certainly things that are not meant to have an ending. MMORPGs, as you said to me on Twitter, Deckard, may very well have quests and some underlying lore to a certain degree, but they're not meant to be anything that you complete to 100%. So
there's always going to be another expansion.
Yeah, or the joke I made, and I don't know if it was if anybody knew that I was really joking here, but the joke I made at the beginning of the stream when I was like, oh, so you completed the Among Us story campaign, and therefore you can tell us if it's any good or not. That Among Us obviously does not have a story campaign. It's just stupid fun with your friends. It's like saying, let's complete the story campaign on Jackbox. Not so that's something where I would say, obviously my theories do not apply.
I don't know. You could write a pretty good story using the T-shirt game.
I don't even know what the T-shirt game is. I'll poke you about that after the stream. Okay, so now for the next question. It's time to self-incriminate. Doc, when have you reviewed something that you had not completed? And did you ever, and follow-up question, optional, do you have any examples of when you went back to it and finished it, and did it change your mind if so? So, 3 questions in one there. What do you think, Doc?
If I'm trying to think of something that I started watching, even though there's a lot more out there that I didn't get to, and made a video about it, I can remember in my early days of being a YouTuber, I made a video about Doctor Who. And that is an immense show. Whether or not you include the classic series, it is an immense show.
Oh, that show started in the 1960s, didn't it?
It did.
And didn't they lose the footage for a good portion of it?
They probably did. I don't know that much about the show, and yet I still made a video about it. I still made a review of what I saw. And it was only a few episodes. I think I maybe watched 4 and just gave my thoughts on, do I like this? What do I like? What do I think they really need to improve? And there are plenty of Whovians, I think that's what the fandom's called, who would look at that and say, well, you didn't watch this. You are still go way, way over into this season and this season to see these characters and do this storyline in order to get a complete look at the show. But I didn't feel like going through the entirety of the show. It didn't grab me that much. I had fun with little bits here and there of what I saw, and I've even watched a few clips since then on YouTube. But I don't feel enticed to watch the entirety of the show, and yet I still felt I want to get my opinion out there. I want to say what I thought about this. Brony, would you accept that? Would you accept that I made a video like that?
I would. Here's what I would do in that situation. I would accept your opinion on specifically those episodes, right? But if you were to try to do you that review, and I'd have to watch it again because I remember you coming out with that. I don't know if I watched it or not because I have very little interest in Doctor Who. But if I were to go and watch that and you said, and you tried to play it off like you were an expert, like you'd seen every episode, but when you had only seen these, or at the very least that you expected these episodes to be representative of the whole 50 going on 60-year history of the Doctor, then I would call you on that. But if you said these are the episodes that I watched, I'm a newcomer into this, these are my thoughts based on the little information that I have right now, that's cool. There's I can't think of anything wrong with that. We're keeping things, I guess the word might be honest in terms of what of our own knowledge going into the subject for the review. Does that make sense?
It does.
Mm-hmm. All right, that makes me happy because I know I tend to ramble. Deckard, what do you think? Have you ever reviewed something that you had not completed?
Going back to MMOs, yes.
All right.
I like to play a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and there are parts of it where I've talked about at least guides of playing mini games and different portions of it as well, but I still hadn't experienced every little quest that has existed, and I still felt confident enough to be able to talk about that portion of the game rather than just go over the entire thing. And even then, what I said at that time may not apply in the future because things still change.
Mm-hmm. You know something, in talking about video games with a story and a definite path, we're getting, it's been 12 years since Skyrim came out. People are still finding new stuff in that game that nobody else has seen before. It's been just as many, if not more, years since the original Halo trilogy came out. People still find Easter eggs and figure things out about the lore that were said or hidden in the game that give perspective on the rest of it to this day. So that that's all something to consider there. So even in my own definitions, full context can sometimes be impossible.
So let me give you another example of that. Another Bethesda game. Fallout 4. If you're playing through that, and you can go the entire game going through the main story and trying to look for your son, and you can get multiple endings, but on top of that, there are little Easter eggs and things which are spread around. Is your experience going to be the same if you paid attention to all of the mannequins that were set up in creepy fashions, or if you didn't go across the plunger room? And players who do know about the plunger room usually don't talk about the plunger room.
Okay, I have no idea what the plunger room is. So
it's just a room with a bunch of plungers in all weird places.
Or in the case of like most Pokemon games, I've heard that you have to, in order to get certain outcomes, you have to do things in a very specific order, which will obviously add or take away from the rest of the game for you, and maybe some of the context as well.
For one of them, you got to learn Braille.
Holy heck.
Oof. I know one other example is if you ever play Final Fantasy VII, you can actually date different characters based on your decisions that happen throughout the course of the game.
Okay. Does any of them save the life of that braided brown-haired chick before?
Oh no, Aerith still dies. Spoilers.
Gosh darn it. She was the only good character in that whole video game.
Yeah, you'll have to see how the remake turns out.
That's another entire series where you don't even realize there are other things. There was a sequel to that game. There was a prequel to that game. There was a phone prequel to that prequel.
Yeah, that's too much. That is way
So
too
that's
much.
what Kingdom's got the idea.
Yeah. DJ, you're not much of a reviewer, but can you give me an example of when you might have, I guess, either stopped reading something halfway through or watching something halfway through, or a reviewer that has stopped without finishing something, and how did that turn out? Like, can you give me your perspective on that, on this question?
Well, I can give you the reverse of that first one with Steven Universe.
Okay.
I didn't watch the beginning. I watched the last 2 seasons.
Alrighty.
And just from those 2 seasons, I feel comfortable enough to give an opinion on at least those 2 seasons and some general thoughts on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't feel like I missed a whole lot in the first few seasons. I felt like I got what I needed to out of those last 2.
I spent the first 75 episodes waiting for that show to get good because everybody kept telling me it gets good, and then it never got good, so I just stopped. And then people were telling me that I should do reviews of it, and I said, no, I can't. It goes against my morals. I haven't seen the whole thing, and I don't want to.
Just make that a Patreon goal.
Yeah, Patreon goal. Let's see how much money it takes before Brony abandons his morals. Doc. Doc, if I ever actually do that, I'm gonna need you to put me down, okay?
There are many ways you could interpret that line.
Exactly. You're already on the right track. So, I'm sorry.
He needs to schedule him for an extended session.
Yeah. That was all I had in terms of questions for tonight's debate. One last chance here. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about, add or take away from anything we've said before we get into the audience participation section? There's those crickets again.
Sorry, I don't have my soundboard with me tonight.
Well, in that case, let's get on to the audience participation segment. So, in case you don't remember from the beginning of the stream, I've been watching the chat, and I've been taking down your questions and your interesting comments, and we're going to read them off now and see what we think and answer some of these questions. If you have any other questions, now would be the time to start asking them. So, Rusty Helm 93. What is the difference between a reviewer and an analysis with this mindset? So, this was a question I posed to the analysis fandom, back in 2014, because it was there were a lot of people. There were over 100 people doing pony analysis, and a great number of them would just get on the microphone or get on the webcam and say what they thought about the episode, or just recap it and just talk about what happened in the episode without even really giving any thoughts. And in private, I never made any videos about this exact topic here, but I would talk with these people and they would call themselves analysts, and I would watch their content and I would say to them, no, you are not an analyst, because I expect some sort of education and depth out of analysis, and what you're giving me is a recap. And I said quite controversially that all analysts are reviewers, but not all reviewers are analysts. So what is the difference between analysis and review? So let's, maybe we should have done more defining our terms at the beginning of the stream here. What exactly is a review? What qualifies as a review? Is it purely subjective, or should we expect some analysis in there? Doc, what do you think about that? Doc's like, why do I hang out with this guy?
More like I'm just remembering my really early days of being a reviewer and people calling me an analyst, and trying to think how many of my videos back then were really analysis, where I was breaking down a character or a theme or the world itself.
Well, Doc, do you remember why people called us analysts?
Because some other people came up with the term and used it a lot.
Yeah, pretty much, because we wanted to, the Brony fandom wanted to talk about the show. Digi was the first person to really take the stage. I mean, there were people before him and around the same time as him, but he shot up. Digi Bro experiencing some technical.
We're losing Brony.
I hope not.
Yeah, the stream's
your voice keeps going in and out.
The stream is paused as well.
Okay.
Is anybody able to hear me?
I can hear you.
I think Discord was just having a hiccup or two.
No,
it's entirely possible.
We lost the stream momentarily as well. So I'm sorry about that, gentlemen and the audience. It looks like we're back online. So thank you for bearing with me. But what I was saying was Digibrony was the first to reach a very wide audience in the Brony fandom, and he called himself an analyst, and what he did, analysis. And in his early days, I would have agreed with that, because he did put a lot of thought into the headcanons and the character analyses that he was putting forward. As time went on, he put less and less effort into his work. But the name analyst had caught on and became a blanket term for pretty much anybody talking about Pony. So yeah, basically what you just said, but I added some detail to it. So, what's the difference between review and analysis?
Did you still want my opinion, or were you asking the others?
No, I still wanted your opinion, because
Okay. I can remember review videos, especially in my early days, where I talked specifically about what happened in an episode, why I did or did not like it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was probably more reviewing. And other episodes where I'm talking about a very specific character and their traits and how they interact with other characters. And I thought, yeah, this is more of breaking down why this works on more of an objective level.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it is more about, is this more an objective point of view or a subjective point of view that determines whether it's reviewing or analyzing? I don't know. I'm sure there are plenty of people who can think of examples where that might not work.
Mm-hmm. Deckard, what do you think?
I think that reviewing is very much more opinionated. It's going to be very subjective to how you feel something happened in the episode. Analysis is much more broken down. I think it's actually a little more scientific when you look at it, because you're from start to finish trying to answer your own questions and see if it fits that mold.
Mm-hmm. And just to tell you, I'm pretty much going to say the exact same thing as Deckard. So real quick, I'll add on to it. Because he used the word scientific, and that's what I was going to work with. I believe that art is subjective, but not nearly as much so as people tend to believe it is, usually for the excuse of saying, I made this and I think it's good, so therefore it is good. Or same thing could be said from the audience perspective. I think this is good, therefore. I think tropes of any kind of art in any medium have a criteria of what makes them good. And that can be scientifically shown and consistently demonstrated even across cultures and across time. You see a lot of the same types of rules being applied to literature and poetry and music and photography, painting. So, there's a lot of those same types of rules across time and across culture. So definitely there is criteria that can be met there. So when analyzing something scientifically from that artistic standpoint, it becomes you have to set out with a goal in mind, with a hypothesis. This is what this piece was trying to convey. Did it succeed in the methods that it used? So those are my 2 cents. DJ, what do you think? What's the difference between analysis and review?
I don't really think I have anything to add. You guys pretty much just hit the nail on the head there.
Alrighty then. Next question. Paladin Pony T says, do we think a book or a book series is harder to review because it takes more? He says because you have to use your mind more. I would summarize that down into because it takes more dedication and time. DJ, what do you think about that?
No, I wouldn't completely agree with that. I've known a lot of people that could finish a book within an hour. I've seen someone actually read a lot of the Harry Potter books in a day. So I think it's just down your reading capabilities.
There's a YouTuber, I forgot his name, but he's very easy to look up. He took a year to binge through all of the Halo novels to date. And that was a really interesting video. Because he read every Halo novel and then he made his video. And throughout the course of that year, he filmed, different aspects of his journey through those novels for his own notes. And then those became part of the video as well. Deckard, what do you think? Is a book or a book series harder to review?
I would say so, only for one reason.
Tell me.
Inflection. If you're reading a book, you're not always getting the tone of voice or some of the subtle cues that you'd get from something if you're watching a series or seeing something being acted. So your opinion is very much formed on your own perception and imagination in reading that book.
Hey, Deckard, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?
And he said calmly.
Yeah, exactly. But, case in point, basically, I was agreeing with you.
So...
Yeah, go ahead.
Overall, I'm not saying you couldn't have an interesting opinion for how you're reading or giving an idea of the book, but the book is also very different than the video. It's always going to be an interesting comparison.
Alrighty then, and Dr. Wolf, what do you think?
In regards to going through an entire book series?
Yes, or even just a singular book. Is it harder to review a literature medium than it is a visual medium. I'm really just taking some serious liberties with people's questions over here.
I'm trying to think. If I was attempting to tackle a book as opposed to a movie based on that book, or by contrast, that book being based on that movie, which would I find more difficult to break down and give my honest opinion over? There is so much in a visual medium that the production staff are kind of creating for you. And you are not only analyzing the story, the characters, and everything else there, you are analyzing what the production staff put into that visual medium.
Mm-hmm.
So are analyzing more than you would in the book. In the book, you get a great deal more detail on a scene that in a movie could go by in less than a minute.
Well, you certainly can if the writer is any good, but I digress.
And in that respect, you could analyze how well this writer is creating a scene in your mind. Whereas with the visual medium, it's up to the production staff, not the writer, to really determine that. So I don't really know which would be harder. It depends on what questions you're really going after.
All right, that's fair enough. Let's see here. Pony Cordero says, I can emphasize with a game. Maybe he meant sympathize. I'm not 100% sure, but I can emphasize. Oh no, he can emphasize. Emphasize is the right word. I'm sorry, Anthony. With a game book series being very long and difficult to complete in a timely manner for career reviewers. However, I hate the common mantra of "Don't worry, bro. It totally gets good at season 10." I agree there. I'm not the type of person, like, if you can't hook me in 3 episodes, then I don't know. That's points against you in terms of your writing skill, in my opinion. What do we think about that? So, Pony Cordero says he can understand why it's harder to get the full context on something like that's very long format, like a book or a video game. But should that be an excuse for wading through something that's probably going to be bad for the first half of it? And he's correcting me in the chat. He said empathize, and I am dyslexic. I'm not really dyslexic, but I guess I just didn't see the word. So what do we think about that, gentlemen? Is that an excuse?
I don't think it is. You really don't need to subject yourself to something that's going to be unpleasant just for the sake of making the review. That's sort of a thing that I personally would rather preserve my own mental health than to continue going through something unless I really, really saw that it might have some kind of potential. I personally may have to stop after a certain point, and I would explain the reason why.
Okay. DJ, what do you think?
Considering I saw a YouTuber recently force himself to watch 100 episodes of Scrappy-Doo, I think you need to know when to stop.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it gets good later. If it's killing you inside, you need to stop.
And with Scrappy-Doo, we certainly know the answer to that question.
I don't even hate Scrappy-Doo, but there's a certain point when you need to stop, man. You need to stop.
Stop it. Get some help.
We don't acknowledge the existence of Michael Jordan in this dojo. Anyway, Paladin Pony T says, is it hard for you to give a negative review on something? Actually, before I get to this, I didn't hear from Doc. Doc, is something being long format an excuse for waiting until it gets good?
I can think of
Friendship
a
is
case-
Magic sucked for the first 100 episodes. It didn't start getting good until Slice of Life. Is it worth watching 99 episodes kind of thing? What do you think, Doc?
There are those who actually place value on how entertaining it can be to ask a reviewer, this is so hard to sit through. And you can be wildly entertaining when you subject yourself to something that is so hard to sit through and even giving it a deep dive. Haven't you ever come across any formats where you've actually wanted to see, hey, this is terrible. I want to see what this person subjects himself to by going through it, even if it is 100 episodes.
I think there was a good portion of the Channel Awesome staff that made a living on doing that very thing.
Isn't that just Mystery Science Theater 3000?
That as well. So with that, now we can move on. Now that I got myself organized here, a Paladin Pony T says, "Is it hard for you to give a negative review on something made by a fan or a friend?" So Doc, what do you think about that? Someone comes up to you and says, what do you think about this thing that I'm just going to throw a name out here randomly. Let's say Thespio, makes something. And if you happen to think it's horrible, and you're asked to do a review of it, how honest are you going to be? Or is the fact that we're friends with this guy going to color your opinion of it?
The fact that I am friends with this person would give me more of a motivation to give a deep dive on whatever this medium is. And if I'm not particularly enjoying myself, I would still focus on, well, I can put aside more of my subjective thoughts and think more objectively. Is this something that could work for others, even if it doesn't necessarily work for me? And if I can answer that question honestly, that will determine whether I am giving a positive or negative review on whatever this medium is.
Alrighty then. Deckard, what do you think?
I mean, I'm hesitant to do something if it involves a friend, and I try to look for the positive things in what I try to review. I'll still be I'll give constructive criticism when I discuss something with them, but I honestly, I don't think I could give an objective review right off the bat. There's still going to be some bias because of that relationship, and I'll still review it, but I'd have to maybe give a disclaimer.
Alrighty then. DJ, do you want to weigh on this at all?
Constructive criticism, and depending on the friend is how it will be framed.
Me, I'm not the type of person to pull punches, especially if let's say one of my friends brings me something and says, "What do you think about this?" I'm gonna pull it apart. But I'm going to try, and well, if there is something to pull apart, that's the caveat there, because maybe they did a very good job, and I'll tell them, hey, you did a very good job. I might at that point nitpick something so that they have something to work on for next time. I don't know. I'm very much of the mindset of constant self-improvement, and I have a bad habit of projecting that onto other people as well. But I'm going to be totally honest with somebody, and I have a tendency to sometimes be brutally honest with somebody, but my intention is always, I want to see you reach your full potential. This is what I think you're missing, or this is what I think the next step would be. Some of my friends have taken to that very well. But I do remember one time where a gentleman by the name of, at the time his name was Brick Brony. I don't think he makes content anymore, but he asked me what I thought about his work. And all I told him was he's got a lot of room for improvement, and he broke down. So he didn't respond to that well at all. So those are my thoughts there. Willow Blackheart says, I have completion anxiety. How do I fix that? Doc, do you have any suggestions for Willow Blackheart?
Remind me again the question.
They say they have completion anxiety. What? How do we fix that?
I'm sorry, completion anxiety. I'm trying to understand that.
Okay, so typically, in my experience, when I've seen that in other people, it is they behold the monumentous task of completing something. They got a video game that's going to take 40 hours. Holy heck, 40 hours is just an inconceivable amount of time. They've got a book with 1,000 pages in it. They can't, they cannot comprehend 1,000, and the idea of finishing it is daunting and overwhelming, and it stops them from actually going through with it. Completion anxiety.
I'm trying to think of immense projects or overwhelming tasks that just seem incredibly daunting at first.
A fully animated therapy session.
Uh-huh.
I am also a YouTube series with completely original artwork going on for several years.
Yeah. I am reminded of Zephyr Breeze, Fluttershy's brother, for anyone who doesn't recognize the name.
Indeed.
And he had a very short stint in the series, but his focus episode was all about he wasn't willing to even try tackling problems because he was afraid of failing. He was afraid of even just taking that first step on something that just seems so daunting to him.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of that lesson was that if you don't challenge yourself, you won't grow. And yes, that means putting aside that fear of failure. And that in itself is rather daunting. Trying to complete something that if you're doing it for fun, and it is only just for fun that you are doing it, you don't have to subject yourself to something that seems incredibly daunting if you will have more fun with something else. But in so many other cases, I'm just reminded, without challenge, there can be no growth. And if you are only doing that which you are comfortable with, can you honestly say that you're growing?
Alrighty then, Deckard, what do you think? How do we get over completion anxiety?
Well, first I'm going to say I can completely relate to this. I've played some games where I've gone through all the quests, all the side quests, gotten to talk to every single person that's in the map, making sure that I've gone through every little nook and cranny, gone into every building, making sure I hopefully haven't missed everything. And then I complete the game, and it shows New Game Plus. I look at it, and then I have to ask myself, do I need to spend that much time on this again? You really need to kind of review when to step back. And you also need to ask yourself if you feel it's worth your time to be able to go over that much things, anything that you're trying to complete in that much detail. Because there's, even if you see 100% and you have a bar that measures all of that, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's perfection in that. You have to try and understand that your satisfaction is something that you measure. It's not necessarily something that's measured by that bar. So you can play the game up to 95% of whatever you're doing and then say, I feel I've done well enough, which goes back to originally what we were talking about to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Before the stream, my friend who's been on the show before, ChucklyFun as well as Dever, both said completionist was the wrong word to use. And I said, too late, we're going with it. But yeah, that's exactly the kind of reason why it plays into what we're talking about here.
So overall, you can still enjoy the game to whatever extent you want. It's not even games. I'm saying like in any medium and anything that you're trying to do. But you need to set your own limits, and you need to understand that if you're going over something to that much of an extent where it's stressing you out, is it healthy? Do you need to step back? Maybe talk to somebody else, get some perspective on how much time you're spending on it, and maybe find another activity to do. It's okay to take a break.
Indeed. DJ, do you have any experience with this subject?
Yes. To put it simply, the advice I have heard for when you have a huge task before you and it's just stressing you out, it's so much to do, to break it down. Mm-hmm. There's always ways that you can minimize what you're seeing. So instead of like one giant tower, you see a sliver, you complete it, you move on to the next sliver. To go back to the YouTuber I mentioned before that's been doing One Piece in 5 months, Totally Not Mark, he's been getting through it bit by bit by going arc after arc after arc. 1 week he reads the amount of chapters for the arc, does his video, and then moves on to the next arc. And I think breaking it up like that is a good way to get anything done. If he can do One Piece, you can get a book project done.
My advice would be roughly the same. And I would add that, some people have a different way of looking at it. There's going to be a lot of people that just need to break it down piece by piece and focus on one thing at a time and not even worry about the bigger picture. And when you just get good at focusing on one challenge at a time, before you know it, the whole thing is completed. And and it wasn't nearly as bad as you expected it to be. The next question is to ask how necessary it is to your life. When we're dealing with something in the entertainment medium, probably not all that necessary in the grand scheme of things, especially if it seems daunting. Like I said earlier, I don't have time to waste on something I'm not going to enjoy if I don't need to do it. But when that applies to things that are essential to life, and like finding a job or improving in what you do, that's very important that you either figure out how to take it piece by piece or to just tackle the whole thing and overcome with sheer force of will. But there's a million different ways to go about that, and they all start with taking that first step. I always say strength is a choice, because the more you do something difficult, the easier it will become. And then, when you overcome one challenge, the next will appear, and you just keep repeating the process of self-improvement. But you have got to choose to take those steps. And if you don't, well, you're going to reach your limits much quicker. You won't be able to grow, like Doc was saying earlier. And if you can't grow, then, you know, where are you right now in life? That's where you're going to be. If you're stable and independent, I guess you can get away with it. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can get away with it. But if you're still at a point where you're not independent, where you rely on the generosity of other people, that is a finite resource. They won't be able to, you know, the people that you care about won't be able to take care of you forever. And they will eventually need you. And when that time comes, are you going to be a burden, or are you going to be able to stand on your own? And I will tell you this quite bluntly, I have zero respect for people that need to take the next step in their life to be a contributing member of society and choose not to. Especially for some stupid reason, like it's difficult, or, I have anxiety. Get over yourself. I've done it. And the reason I say it like that is because I've done it myself, and there's not a gosh darn thing special about me. The only, I understood that I had power in my choices, and I made the choice. Anybody else can do the same thing. Next question here. Trent Giron says, Brony, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the Mr. Enter review of Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles a good example of what not to do? I haven't seen that video, so I'll get with you after the stream, and I'll see that video and give you a proper answer to that question. Paladin Pony T says, is it hard to separate personal views from the thing that you are reviewing? And I would say it's not just hard, it's impossible. And the best thing that you can do is practice introspection and separating yourself and understanding where you might have biases and how to overcome them. You will never be perfect in that, but you will be with enough practice you might get better than other people might do. Deckard, what do you think about what Paladin Pony T says here? Is it possible to separate your own personal opinions from yourself as an objective reviewer?
I think the thing that you should understand is you're still going to have your own opinion, but you can at least try to gauge your thoughts and your feelings and maybe set aside some of that in order to give a more objective view. It's not going to be 100% objective, but you're still going to be able to at least give a better perspective on something. But then again, that also goes between the idea of reviewing and analysis. So how much of that are you trying to do? And really, what questions are you going to ask?
And Doc, what do you think?
I had thought that I had given my opinion on this, but maybe we'd moved on to another part of the conversation and not realized it. Apologies. Trying to focus.
We have talked about a lot tonight, and we are over a half hour over time, so I don't blame you. But yeah, give it to me in 3 sentences or less. Is it hard to separate your own personal views from reviewing something objectively?
Difficult, but the more you can, the more that you can move towards that objective opinion. But anyone who thinks that you have to be 100% objective, it just doesn't work for me personally.
Yeah, and as much trash as I talk about being objective, I can agree to a certain degree, Doc, that if you could, let's say it was even possible to be 100% objective, you would completely take the human aspect out of it. And and then it's not, the art ceases to be art at that point when it doesn't form a human connection. So, I mean, I do believe that there is a scientific method and that things are not as subjective as they seem, but it's still, you still don't want to lose the human aspect of it. Last two questions here, both from Raptech Clawtooth Badillo, or Badillo if he happens to be Spanish. Dr. Wolf, who is your favorite princess?
Who have I enjoyed the most watching the show over the years?
You know what? Give me the subjective and the objective if they're not the same. If they're not the same character.
Let's see. Who have I enjoyed the most? Who have I respected the most? Of all the princesses, I've probably enjoyed Twilight Sparkle the most. But who have I respected the most? That would probably be Princess Celestia. So, in accordance to what you said earlier, Brony, I'm kind of opposite in that respect.
Alrighty then. And Deckard, how about you?
Princess Luna 2020.
I you know something I should have. I don't even know why I bothered asking. I really don't. DJ.
Let's see. Starlight isn't official yet. I would have to say my favorite's Twilight.
Okay. And is that both from a subjective and objective standpoint?
Yeah, I think it works objectively as well since she is the main character, so she gets a lot of the attention.
All right, that works. I was sitting here gripping my seat, hoping that nobody was gonna be the troll to say Flurry Heart and cause me to spontaneously combust. I might have disowned you. Anyway, no, you cannot change your answer. It's bad enough you said Starlight. Reptech also says another thing. G4 ended almost a year ago. Do we think it's still worth doing reviews and analyses of it now? DJ, what do you think about that?
I think that's a perfect time to continue the analysis because as more time passes, the more you can look at it, steal from Silver Quill after the fact. You can start seeing how it works as time passes, how it still holds up. I mean, going back to season 1, still to this day, you're going to notice a lot of different things, like
Applejack's voice.
Yeah, Applejack's voice always throws me off every time I look at the first episodes.
Yep. There's no reason, if anything, there's no reason to not have full context now. If anything, we should be able to get better analysis now than we did at any other point in time. So let's see here. Doc, what do you think? Is it worth continuing to analyze Friendship is Magic?
If you're having fun with it, if what you are creating is enjoyable to you, focus more on, is this something that I can take part in and find new things to discover, even if I'm watching same episodes that I watched years before.
Mm-hmm.
Focus less on how many people would watch it and whether you are having fun with it, because that's what's kept me going all these years.
All right, that makes sense. Anything to enjoy the life that you've been given. Deckard, what do you think?
I think that it's more than possible to do that. My channel's always been mixed media and trying to answer things at my own pace, but also trying to do projects, skits, and other fun things which don't necessarily have to run with the show in parallel. I'm still doing review stuff with people, so I more than enjoy it. It just takes me a little longer nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to wrap this up, I'm going to say I'm going to address Pony Cordero, who says, Flurry hard for God, Queen of Equestria. He's just trying to get to me, and it's working. So I'll save that for another day. I'll see you on Monday, Pony Cordero. We'll see how that holds up. He's a friend of mine in real life, and we work out together on Mondays. Anyway, so yeah, let's wrap this up. We killed quite a bit of time tonight, and I've had fun discussing this topic. Doc, what do you think? Have you had fun tonight?
We came across some interesting topics here and there, and yes, I found some fair perspectives I hadn't considered.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Did you learn anything?
A few things that I'm going to ponder for later, certainly.
All right. Well, that's the only thing that really matters to me here is that we had fun and that we learned something. Deckard, what did you think of tonight's stream?
Definitely enjoyed it. I would say that overall, we all had some good opinions and we had fun.
All right, good. DJ, did you learn anything tonight?
I learned that I could annoy Brony even more with Princess Flurryheart.
Yep. It's but then again, you already knew how to push all my buttons anyway, you goof nugget.
That's why you keep me around.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the reasons. I swear to God, this guy pays me $25 a month just to sit here and make fun of me. All right. Big shout. Speaking of my patrons here and what they give me to make me the laughing stock of my own server. Big shout out to those patrons, especially those on the $10 and up tier. This blue goof nugget right here being one of them, as well as Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Jennan, Kellogg, Cal Christensen, Stephen A. Wilson, Reck, Rein-Kun, Princess Sunshine Sparkle, Bootleg Bard, The Silly Fox, Zoroark 720, and the Equestrian City Heroverse series. Please check out all of their content links in the description. They all make some pretty good stuff. If you would like to be on the show, I would love to have you on this show. We just need to get you on the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You get into the server where you can join DJ in making fun of me on a regular basis and pushing all of my buttons. You also get to be on the show if you're interested in any of the topics, and you can make suggestions for topics as well as games we play. If you want to hang out with me some more, tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Princess Heather Blossom's channel, she's going to be doing chaos and crocheting for 2 hours. I'm there and I read the chat for her. And next Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we're doing another Friday night fight. So stay tuned for that. Everybody give a big thanks to my guests who came on once again at the last minute tonight. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Deckard, for coming on.
Thank you kindly, Brony.
Yep, it was great having you on. Be sure to have a wonderful weekend. God bless. Stay safe out there, and I will see you all next time. Say good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.